So for this morning session, we're going to draw a very simple cityscape. So I've had a few messages through from people who've seen some of my kind of more complicated illustrations. So I illustrated a lot of the Wasgage children's puzzles a while back. I do kind of quite a lot of really complex cartoons with lots of stuff going on. And in quite a lot of these, I have sort of these cityscapes. So I've had a few people asking how to draw cityscapes. And it's the same approach as with anything else that you're drawing, is to start off as simple as possible. So we're going to use some really simple little shapes, put those shapes together, use them as a guideline, and then add in extra details as we go along. And you should end up with a really cool sort of effective cityscape at the end of it. Now, buildings generally are boxes. They're rectangles, the squares kind of put together in different ways. So that's exactly where we're going to start. We're going to start by drawing a series. Let's just see if you can see that a bit better. There we go. A series of squares and rectangles. And this is going to become our city. So we're going to overlap these slightly. So this bottom edge, say along here, we're going to keep along one line really. But other ones, we're going to draw in these various different sizes. You can't really go wrong at this point. Do some long, do some shorter, have them overlapping a little bit. These are going to become our buildings. So we've got our first little set of squares. Okay. Now we're going to add to these a little bit more. We're going to add some more sort of squares in up here. Got some on the tops of the buildings. Got some hidden behind again. So we're just overlapping more and more of these squares. Now these are our guidelines, remember? So I'm drawing a little bit darker than I normally would here, just so you can see what's going on. But when it comes to your drawing, ideally you want these to be kept kind of quite light, because then you're going to be going over with a pen or with a darker pencil to choose which of these lines you want to keep, and it's not going to be all of them. So there we go, more little squares. Okay, that'll kind of do the squares for now. But now we're going to add in some more shapes, because we don't want our buildings to just look like squares. The things that are going to sort of bring this to life a little bit more is getting in these little more sort of subtle shapes. So we're going to start off by adding in some triangles. Some of those triangles might be in, say, as a rooftop like that. That's fine. There we go. We'll have one along there. Some of them might be more like half triangles, not filling up a whole roof. You see. Got a few of these in. We don't need too many. And then we're also going to add in. Let's have a circle going up here, and you can even add in, say, a dome on there. We'll go for another one down there as well. Okay, yours might look completely different to this, and that's kind of the whole idea, is you're just using these basic shapes to begin with, but then this gives us the base for our building, our buildings. And this is the starting point. Now it comes to choosing the lines that we want to keep. So I'm going to switch over to a pen here, just so you can see a bit better. You can use a pencil still and just press a little bit harder than you were previously. Morning Carol, morning Karen. Thanks for joining us again. Like I say, you can just press a little bit harder with a pencil if you want to. You can use a darker pencil. You can switch over to a pen if you like. So people always ask kind of what sort of equipment I use. Generally it's whatever I've got to hand. I'm not really that set on using the same sort of equipment all the time. But this time, Faber-Castell drawing pens, 6-pit artist pens. This is a brush pen. I'll also be using the slightly finer sort of medium liner pen as well. You don't need to use the same pens. It's just find something that you're comfortable with drawing with. I like drawing with brush pens. I always have done. There's kind of a nice little sort of flow to it, but you just use whatever you're comfortable using. Now at this point, we're going to start adding in some of the lines that we want to keep. Now, some of these buildings are going to be obscured by other buildings. So look, I want to keep in these lines here. I'm not bothered about that one. I don't want that one. So I'm not going to go over it. I want to keep in them lines there. See, this bit is in front of the other building, so I want to keep those lines, but I don't want to keep them ones that are hidden behind. There you go, you're just working through the illustration, picking out the lines that you want to keep, not going over the lines that you don't want to keep. It's very rough to begin with. And then after we've done this, we're going to go in and start adding in a little bit more detail. So there we go. I want to keep those lines in. They're quite nice. Keep that one. Okay, this one's set behind. So I want to keep that in. I want to keep those in. Yeah, and this way you're starting to get a little bit of depth to your cityscape. You've got some buildings in front of others. There we go. Cool. So that's the first stage, I suppose. So you've now got these different levels of buildings, some kind of quite interesting shapes going on. And now we want to start adding in sort of bits of detail. There's a bunch of different ways you can do this. There's a ton of them. So very simply, first of all, we're going to go into this building. I don't want to draw these windows in too much detail, so I'm just going to do little lines really. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2. See, you've got a little bit hidden behind there. And that's sort of enough for some of the buildings. You don't have to do a huge amount of detail. We can do similar on here, but this time let's make those a little bit thicker. The trick is with the buildings, you want a little bit of symmetry really. So if you've got these kind of straight lines running across, but we're not going to go all the way down the building with that one. We'll come back to that in a second. So we'll leave a little gap. We can do the same thing down there. Okay, you might want to draw in your windows in a little bit more detail, so you can draw a square in with a little window ledge underneath. Again, we're not putting an absolute ton of detail into this stage, just really simple, basic shapes. There's just quite a lot of the shapes, that's all. Go for some arched windows on there, little window ledges. Again, avoiding any real detail. Keeping it nice and simple. This one again, let's go for just a few little lines. Go for some little squares. See, I'm not spending a huge amount of time making these things sort of too perfect. You can spend a little bit more time making them neater if you want. I would, for this kind of drawing, I'd try and avoid using rulers. It's a good way of practicing keeping stuff relatively neat. But you'll see mine, these windows are all kind of different shapes. They're not perfectly in line. It doesn't really matter. As soon as you get into using rulers on this kind of thing, it just takes forever and it doesn't actually end up looking that much better. Use it as a way of kind of practicing, drawing neat squares and neat little arches. Okay, I'm just going to bang a load of my windows here. Let's just put a couple more up there. That'll do for now on those bits. Next, we're not quite there yet, so we're going to start adding in a few things to break up the shape of these buildings a little bit. So areas where I've left, say here, we're going to go for some horizontal lines, and this just put in a little bit of little bit of cross hatching across there, and it's these extra little details that will start to bring your buildings to life a little bit. So again, go in there. This time let's do some more cross hatching downwards. We have same across here. Let's go for some little wriggles. See, sticking a few more little windows across there. But then you've got all these areas where you can just start adding in little details. Just work with these horizontal and these vertical lines to add little areas of interest. And don't be afraid about doing some bits kind of quite dark. It's that will break up your illustration a bit and make it look a little bit more interesting. But then remember to have those areas where it's a little bit lighter as well. I'm going to go for a couple there. And then at the same time, we're going to get in a few of these shapes that aren't your horizontal and your vertical lines as well. So in here, let's just get in a few little lines in there. Let's actually box that off, and we'll get some down in there. Because it's these lines that just add these extra bits of interest to your drawing. And if you look at a cityscape, it's not all straight lines. There are these extra little angles and shapes and stuff going all over the place. And if you look, I've started doing to the top of the buildings here. So areas where there's these might be bits that you can't really see particularly well, so they're shadowed out. But I'm just putting little bits of boxes on. Some tall, some long. Just adding, these might be chimney stacks, might be sort of antennas and aerials and all that kind of stuff. So adding in all these little details, just little bits of interest. And again, we can do a similar sort of thing with, look, let's just do like flagpoles and antennas. Just keeping them nice and simple little lines. But you've got a lot of these things going on, and it's that kind of makes this stuff interesting to look at. So you don't need tons of them. Just kind of like drop in these little antennas and flagpoles, tops of the buildings. You see how rough these are. There's no real detail at all to these, but it's starting to come together as a really nice sort of scene. Now we need to get a little bit more depth into this now. So we need to draw some buildings that are set really far back and hidden in the shadows between this stuff. So if you look at where I've got things like a gap here, I'm going to draw in another building there. I was going to shade that in. I can do the same thing. That's hidden behind at the top up there, look. Let's just shade that in. We've got another one, so look, hidden right back there. Again, nice and rough, not worrying too much about any detail. These lines don't have to be perfect, but by adding in these darker areas, these buildings that are set further back, they're out of the light, you're starting to get some real depth to your city now. It's starting to come to life a little bit. These ones at the back, there's no reason they can't have flagpoles and things as well, or antennas. And now we can start to add in the next layer of detail, so even more stuff. So we drew this circle in at the beginning. Let's draw that circle in again now. Add a little line inside to make this into a very sort of basic clock. There we go. And we can start adding other little bits of detail in as well. So not all of your lines in a city are going to be straight, whether they're an angle or not. So we can start adding in little bits of detail underneath some of the buildings here. This one, maybe do a similar thing sort of on top. We can start adding in extra little bricks, just individual bricks. Don't try to draw every single brick on, but just by putting in these little shapes, it starts to break up the drawing a little bit. Now, one of the really nice things you can do, I'm going to switch over to a finer pen now. So I'm going to switch across to a medium liner pen. Like I say, you can just press a little bit lighter, just be a bit more careful with the lines. You don't have to use different pens. But a lot of the time when I'm drawing this sort of cityscape, I will use a thicker pen, something like a brush pen, and a finer liner. This lets you get in some of those really fine details. So we're going across here, look, we might have these. Just adding in little areas of detail. So look, you might have little circles, little lights. I mean, some of these things don't need to make as much sense as others. So you don't. A lot of time when I'm drawing by not making sense, I mean, a lot of the time when I'm drawing a cityscape, I don't necessarily know what the lines are. I don't know that that line is a window or a staircase or whatever. Sometimes you're just putting in little shapes to kind of create an extra piece of interest. Okay, because buildings aren't exactly symmetrical, and it's these little bits. There might be little signs that have been stuck on. There might be you might have little bits of graffiti on the side of the building. You might have things that are stacked up on rooftops and things that, just kind of random little bits and pieces that are going on. I'm going to switch back across to this brush pen quickly, because we need to set this down a little bit. So to do this, we're going to draw in some bushes and some hedges and trees and stuff, and we're going to make these really, really simple. So you're literally just scribbling like ovalist shapes and little fluffy sheep. There you go. And you're really not worrying about getting these right. These are little scribbles. Just along the bottom, because we don't want them to be too detailed. It's going to completely throw your eye out when you look at it. Again, some of these, let's shade those in a little bit. Not all of them, but some of them you want to be a little bit darker than others. Just to start adding a little bit of depth, and then we're just going to start sketching in some little. There's no plan to this. This is just scribbles, but horizontal scribbles. And what these will start to do is give the impressions of roads and paths and bits for your city to sit on. And then we can go in and start adding in extra little details. So there might be some street lights. And with any of these bits, don't be afraid of overlapping other things. You see a lot of these are overlapping the buildings and the path, and it doesn't matter. That's how cities work. You do get things that are sort of overlapping. It just makes it all look a little bit more interesting. Now, if you want to, at this stage, you can actually add in another layer of depth as well. So very quickly, I'll show you. So even more rough. As you can see how I've not done that really nice and crisp. I've done it deliberately really rough in the background. So very, very sketchy. But by adding those in, we get yet another layer of depth to these buildings. But these have to be done quick and loose and sort of free. And that way, look, your building's starting to look even more, your city's starting to look even more busy, even more built up. Now again, I'm going to switch back to the finer pen here. The finer pen, I'm going to start putting in some lines here. At this point, when you first start drawing this sort of line can be a little bit scary. But I'm going to be putting in things like, watch this, a line straight across. From the top of some of these sort of flagpoles. We've got some of these lines just sort of sweeping across. No real plan to a lot of this, but we've got things like phone lines and TV cables, all that kind of stuff going on. And then just get in there with a few little bits of extra detail. So if you want to put crosses in on the windows, So on the window panes, you can sort of do that. Put in little blinds by doing little horizontal lines, look, or little vertical lines in from the side. You might do just random little stains and scribbles on the side of the buildings and keep it nice and rough here. There's no planning at all to these bits. You're just busying up the picture a little bit, I suppose. And final little bit I'm going to put in, again, back to the slightly thicker pen here. Sorry, I'm going to put in some steps. So if you imagine going up to the side of the building here, we're going to go a diagonal line down, and then just draw in little horizontal lines, and you have some steps sort of running up. You can start getting really creative with this stuff. So let's have a look. We might have sort of a curved line up there, and then you got a little curved set of steps running at the top of the building. I mean, don't go too far with these. You don't need too many, but these steps and these stairs, again, will just break your drawing up a little bit. And there we go. I've got a pretty nice looking cityscape. Now I'm going to show you really quickly. So anybody who joined me for the live drawing session the other day, a couple of bits I did, I've seen I work in watercolor quite a lot, and I use one of these. So this brush pen is obviously filled with water, so you're not having to use a pot of water all the time. They're really cheap. These things are like about £3 each or something. Pick them up online. I'm going to just quickly put a wash in on this, just to make it pop out a little bit. So in the background, let's just get a little bit of blue paint. Okay. And just in the background here, it's behind our buildings, we're going to start to put in a bit of this blue, just to make our buildings pop out a little bit more. Don't worry about going over some of these ones in the background. Don't worry about making this thing too neat. Again, this whole cityscape is meant to be kind of rough and sketchy. That sort of adds to it. But just by shading in behind the buildings, you'll see your city pop out from the page a little bit more. Give it a little bit more life. Really quick in there. Make sure we've got any of those areas behind the buildings. And there we go. And that's where we're going to leave this one for today. At this point, you can go in and add extra colours and shades and that kind of stuff. You might want to start adding in bits of colours, so green for the trees, a little bit of colour splashing on the buildings. The thing to remember is don't go overboard on the colour for the buildings. Keep them kind of nice and light, different shades. It's fine, but you don't want to lose a lot of this detail that you've sketched in. You put too much paint in there, too much ink in there, you're not going to be able to pick out this detail anymore. But there you go. It's a pretty effective cityscape with lots of depth to it, lots of details, all starting from just drawing these very simple little boxes. It's a good one for you to try at home. So have a practice, have a play around. You can do different types of cities, different types of buildings, see what you can come up with. As usual, I'd love to see some of the stuff that you all draw. Feel free to send them in, and I will see you all again next time.